study done to look at whether or not this affected the brain in a neurological sense. The cancer studies were incidental. Those were cancer studies. But these were not brain studies. The cancer studies turned up brain tumors. But they didn't look, for example, at these holes in the brain or mental retardation or lowering the ability of people to think or causing dizziness or blindness or any of those things. None of that was looked at. And we were proposing that we design some studies to look at it. And that was the direction I thought we should go. And I should say that at that point, I was involved with a group of people from the food industry. We had created something called the Food Safety Council. We had 35 major corporations, and it had a board that was half corporate people and half consumer advocates, academic people, environmentalists, and so forth, to look at the standards for food safety. And we had written a whole series of standards for food safety. Basically, what I was saying to Rumsfeld is, why don't you bring your company into the same framework that all these other companies have agreed to be a part of? And we had a very good, very full and frank exchange. His scientists kept jumping up and running around the room and saying, there's no problem, there's no problem, there's no problem. Ultimately, he made the decision not to find out what the facts were, but to move forward on the limited record that they had before them. And I believe it was a decision that was made that said we can accomplish our ends better legally and politically than we can by actually doing the science to determine the outcome of the questions that are being asked. And in my mind, that demonstrated that he was an individual not interested in facts, not interested in the truth, not interested in finding out what the fundamental realities are, but much, much more interested in setting a goal and then by will and force pulling all the resources that he could possibly pull together to achieve that goal, i.e. get NutraSweet on the market and sold.
And so Donald Rumsfeld had been in all these meetings and known all of these potentially very harmful effects of this substance that he then went on and continued to market?
Well, I can't say what Donald Rumsfeld knew or didn't know. He's not a scientist. He's not very interested in science, from what I can tell. More or less, he's a fixer. He's an operative. You assign him a job and he goes and he does it. Now, I'm sure that as he gets up into the level of Defense Department, he sort of makes up his own jobs and says, I'm going to do these things. But facts are not all that important to how he proceeds, because he's so confident that he knows what the outcome should be, that he will look across, at least in the way he did on NutraSweet, he looked across the horizon to find all those facts that would support his position and then minimized or denigrated all the facts that didn't support his position.
In 1980, the Public Board of Inquiry voted unanimously to reject the use of aspartame until additional studies could be done on aspartame's potential to cause brain tumors.
The product was said not to be, it was ruled by law, it was said you cannot market this product. And then they had to go and do political triage and get in there and manipulate the process. So, I mean, the manipulation was so powerful that one of the first things that Ronald Reagan did when he became president was suspend the authority of the FDA commissioner to take any actions. So he was sworn in whatever day in January, and the next day he issued an executive order eliminating the FDA commissioner's authority to take actions. There was obviously a fear on the part of somebody that the commissioner was going to do something about NutraSweet or something else that would create difficulty, because it took him a while to get a new commissioner. It took him a little over a month to get a new commissioner, get the old one out and the new one in. And in that month, the old commissioner was prevented from taking any actions by an executive order. And that takes a high level of political clout to do that. But that's political triage on a situation that had gone sour because Rumsfeld had made the decision to just power his way through and ignore getting the facts.
In 1981, the day after Ronald Reagan took office as U.S. President, G.D. Searle reapplied for the approval of aspartame. Several new studies were submitted along with their application. 3 of the 5 FDA scientists responsible for reviewing brain tumor issues advised against the approval of aspartame. Under the watch of the new FDA Commissioner, Arthur Hull Hayes, the panel lawyer assigned a new panel member to eventually achieve a 3-to-3 split over aspartame. On July 18, 1981, Arthur Hull Hayes overruled the Public Board of Inquiry to approve aspartame for use in dry foods.
Furthermore, the FDA impaneled its own panel to review the Public Board of Inquiry. 3 of those people were assigned, review the cancer part of the Public Board of Inquiry, the part that said you can't market it. Those 3 scientists, every single one of them said, we agree with the Public Board of Inquiry. These are 3 FDA senior scientists. We agree with the Public Board of Inquiry. They met with the commissioner the night before he announced that he was going to approve NutraSweet and begged him not to approve NutraSweet.
Animals just ordinarily do not get brain tumors. And this should have been enough to have invoked the so-called Delaney Amendment to the 1958 Food and Drug Act. It says that if something causes tumors or cancer in experimental animals, you should not approve it for human use.
In 1983, the FDA approved the use of aspartame in carbonated beverages. Under charges of improprieties, Arthur Hull Hayes left the FDA and was hired as a consultant for $1,000 a day by G.D. Searle's public relations firm.
NutraSweet, or aspartame, is the most studied food ingredient ever approved by the FDA, and not just by the FDA, but by more than 70 regulatory bodies around the world.
In order to rubber stamp it around the world, you've got to get it approved in another country. Okay, so let's take Europe. If England were to find out that they wanted them indicted for fraud, if they ever read these reports by the CDC or the FDA Board of Inquiry saying it's not safe, or found out, about that they wanted them indicted, naturally they're not going to approve it. So what they did was, Searle, the manufacturer, made a business deal with the Professor Paul Turner, who was in the regulatory agency in England, and he approved it without anybody knowing it. Parliament had a big blowout about it, and the story was in The Guardian. I have a copy of it. But they did not rescind the order. There were no studies done in the UK, and it was rubber stamped. Then, around the world, they could say, well, it was approved in the United States, it was approved in Europe, and then it was approved, in other places. They tried to get it approved in Canada, and they couldn't do it. But once they got it approved in Europe, they began to rubber stamp it around the world.
The American Dietetic Association, the American Diabetes Association, the American Medical Association, goes all the way down the line. And if you were to see and read their journals and publications and see who the sponsors were and the people who were paying a great deal for advertising therein, it would make a little bit more sense.
But the Center for Disease Control did an investigation and said it was safe.
No, the Center for Disease never said it was safe either. What they did, here is the Center for Disease Control investigation. And it's a 146-page document. What it goes into, what was happening to the people, goes into cardiac arrest, it goes into seizures, it goes into liver problems, it goes into mood alteration, and it goes into death. And it ends up by saying that more neurological studies need to be done. Now here's what happened. If you go to the Center for Disease Control website, you will see a summary, not this 146-page investigation, but a summary that contradicts this report, saying that it was just mild findings. And I told Dr. Satcher, before he left the CDC and became Surgeon General, I said, if you don't take that phony summary off, I will put the whole 146-page investigation on web and let the world see what the Center for Disease Control did. And we do have it on www.dorway.com, like doorway with one O. You can read this entire investigation, and this is the original document.
Betty Martini and her organization, Mission Possible, have served as a lighthouse for people who suspect their toxin to be aspartame and wish to learn more. For over 10 years, she has worked tirelessly to inform people of this issue, often challenged by the pharmaceutical and food industries. Mission Possible is the central hub for prevailing knowledge of aspartame. Betty Martini and Mission Possible contribute to Doorway.com, a website that is likely the most frequently cited Internet source on this issue. A substantial find in my investigation was Betty Martini.
Her work is an act of charity, and her sources are credible.